I'm Keith Whitney with Missouri Main Street. I think I've met almost everybody in here. We do have the city intern here, which is awesome. Why don't we go around the room real quick and just do quick introductions, who you are and what you're with, and if you have a Main Street role. Start with Ashley.
I'm Ashley, I'm Assistant City Manager.
Perfect. Kate to Library, and Kirksville is chosen as well. Kind of following the 4-point approach, we have Jim Thompson here in the spring talking about the EV point and numbers, demographic, those sorts of things, economic development pieces, and so following that up with both design and promotion. So I think Randy is starting, right?
Great. Well, thank y'all for coming out tonight. And this was billed as training tonight, and it is going to be, but we try to be as responsive to the specific needs and when we both observe and take tours and talk to you all. And so as a result, I'm going to shift gears, but let me just jump into, did you start the recording? I did. Just basics of the Main Street approach to design, because I have no idea what sort of the baseline of knowledge about the Main Street program is. And so, well, I tell you what, show of hands, how many people feel like if I met you on an elevator and asked you what Main Street was, you could. The rest of you want like a 30-second version?
Sure.
All right.
Even if I have my own.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you my version. It may not be the best or the most accurate, but I'm a parent of 3 children, and when my kids were young, we gave them each a 4-legged stool, and that stool works best when all 4 legs are present. It becomes a very balanced stool. Holistic approach to downtown revitalization, to historic preservation. It has of course, is the place has to look good and function well for people. Organization, gone are the days where either only the private sector or only the public sector. Notion, I'm not going to steal Ben's thunder, but it's the festivals, activities that we do to bring people downtown to reacquaint them with their place and economic vitality. There are some strategic uses that would complement, not necessarily compete with big box retail. Hopefully what you can see is as long as all 4 of those are in play and working at the same time, you have a very, very balanced approach to economic development within the context of a history. Put them away, and it doesn't matter which one you take away. That's why all 4 are important, and they all have to be operational at all points in time. We talk about design. This is kind of the formal definition. Mine was quick. Basically, the place has to look good and function well. And there's certain things that the design committee has to do in regards to this. But again, if you want to read that on your own, you can. That's the basic definition of the Main Street approach to design. Now, the thing that that was not said in my introduction is while I'm a trained architect, I'm also a recovering architect, because precious few architects would say this out loud. Typically, when we go through architecture school, it's all about us. We forget that there's a context in which those buildings reside. And that's why when it comes to Main Street design, I think design is important, but it's not all important. The reason it's important is here we go, we're going to find out real quick. Typically, sociologists tell us that we make judgments about one another within 3 seconds of meeting people. Based on the way we dress, based on the way we speak, based on the way we smell, all those things, we quickly form opinions about other people. Kirksville through the lens of design based on its appearance, and it's instantaneous as soon as they see your place, and that's why it's important, but it's not all important. But I'm going to let you learn the quickest definition of Main Street approach to design through an interactive exercise. Everybody pair off, look at somebody straight in the eyes, and repeat after me. Go ahead and pair off. I'm so glad. Y'all have to look at somebody and say this too. Okay, I'm so glad you don't look like me.
All right.
So the reason that defines the Main Street approach to design is I'm so glad that Kirksville, Missouri doesn't look like any other place on the planet. You know, if we go out to the bypass, you know, I've seen your Walmart, I've seen your Home Depot, other communities around America. But this is the only place in the world where I can see your layout of your historic buildings around your courthouse. That's why it's imperative that we take great care with these historic architectural resources. Now, as I mentioned to you, you have a handout in front of you, and that was the training that I was going to do tonight. But I am not going to do that training any longer. But I felt like it's, and by the way, the reason is not that I started talking to you all and we observed those conditions. I felt like that generic training wouldn't sort of scratch where you. That's why I've shifted gears, and based on the things. Also to that tonight, okay? I hope that's okay, acceptable to you. However, what you have in front of you is very important, and I want to take 3 minutes to just highlight a couple things. Number one, the approach that I take in that training that's in the handout is exactly what I did yesterday. When Chayton was driving us around town, I was asking questions about each of these criteria or aspects of your community. And in your mind's eye, if you can just draw kind of a bullseye, with the very center being your courthouse square, these radii always start with gateways. Those are the first impressions that we have of the community. It's the welcome to signs. The thoroughfares are the connecting thoroughfares and streets that connect from those gateways. We don't treat them the same as downtown, but they need to at least foreshadow and not. The downtown district, I think we understand, it's that core area surrounding the square, down a few blocks, that has a different architectural character than any other place in your downtown. The streetscapes, of course, is everything from face of building to face of building. Inside of our downtowns, the facades are the face of the buildings. Infill is new construction within historic context. Parks and open spaces, signage are self-explanatory. What I've done you is a favor. That piece of paper contains all the questions that I'm asking intuitively in my brain as I drive around your downtown to evaluate you against that criteria. And so if you end up being on the design committee of the Main Street program here, I would strongly encourage you drive around and walk around downtown with that in your hand, asking it, probably formulate a fairly thorough and thoughtful action plan. Make sense? So that was a 45-minute training in 3 minutes. So now let's talk about your place. As we walked around, as we drove around, as we listened to you, there were a couple of issues that seemed to emerge from. I just felt like it would be a better use of our time tonight to talk about those and to illustrate those than just these kind of generic points. And so the first one that became obvious, and you all said it repeatedly yesterday, is the need. I would agree with that, and I like to think about vibrancy in two different ways, both as amenities and as grants. Vibrancy grants that might be given to a private citizen in their property in sort of a matching grant. But these are the kind of things that we can put in our public realm that foster what I call downtown stickability. This whole idea that a family with children comes downtown or students come downtown, and all of a sudden there's something for them to do. You know, they can play Jenga, they can hang out in a park, they can, of course, shop in your stores, and they can dine in your restaurants, but there are other things that they could do as well. Here's some examples. You know, in your mind's eye, and you have a very easy kind of landing spot for this. You know, and imagine the power of cornhole or bocce being out there, or on a hardscape, giant Scrabble or checkers or giant Jenga. Again, now you go and you eat at a restaurant, you have a scoop of ice cream, and then you go and you play some of these games. But there are other things that we can do, especially in the public realm and on the sidewalks. This lady right here is my neighbor. Her name's Eileen Blythe. Great. Put propane tanks, welded them together in various sizes, and now you sit in this. So these seats are almost always occupied. Of course, I think a lot of people have seen these sort of interactive boards. Anything you could do to get people to linger longer, in your downtown and be interested and engaged. I worked in one town where they literally had an ordinance against buskers, you know. I mean, I love the kind of activities that would engender. I want to talk about this one because I know you have two different universities and perhaps even a third in your near downtown. And so I think some of these amenities would particularly appeal to college students, at least my college-age kids, they do. This is Ponce City Market in Atlanta. What you're looking at is a parking lot, okay? Pop-up park in their parking lot. The only point I want to make is using some of these elements, movable, colorful chairs. Imagine those sprinkled around the courthouse square. I think it's really important. Bryant Park in New York City taught us a valuable lesson. You know, when we just anchor four or six or five, or you want to sit in the sun in the shade, the color just makes a pop and an impression, you know, in the downtown square area. But the thing I want to really point out for the college students, you may wonder, what is this thing back here? Oh, by the way, those are pink flamingos. Everybody loves plastic pink flamingos, right? But this is what I call an Eno hotel. Does everybody know what an Eno is? It's, you know, right? Probably, if we showed up on campus right now, it'd be strung up throughout the campus. And so it's just a place to just string up hammocks. And again, if you could find those, I promise you the students would hang out there. This is the town where I serve as the project architect for their revitalization efforts. And we just created a pop-up park with miniature golf courses. But these miniature golf courses were creations of local art students in conjunction with our Votech school. And they each had the same basic template. I think it was probably a 4x8 sheet of plywood, but each had a different artistic. And as a result, we have these 9 holes. Sometimes they're all together on this corner pocket park, and at other times we distribute them throughout the downtown. So again, anything you could do like this just to create opportunities for students and parents and children to play with, lingering longer. In your mind's eye, I just want you to imagine, what would it be like if these kind of lights were hanging from some of those? Imagine the difference in perception that people would have about that place. Again, your colorful chairs. These are sort of very dense foam. They're soft, and they're movable for children to sit in. And so again, geez, and I don't know if we have enough branches for swings, but I'm a huge. Anything like that could just, again, warm up that public realm and make downtown a very activity at all times. Now we talk about vibrancy grants. These are things that, if you could think about a typical building grant, building facade grant, oftentimes what happens, and I know y'all have an exception right now because of the tip, but in a traditional building facade grant, it does a certain amount of work to the building, then there is a reimbursement to a certain percentage or amount. The basic approach to vibrancy grants is to do that same thing, but with the element. Introduce color and interactivity, such as colorful bistro tables and chairs, flags and banners, flowers, just any amount of things that could animate the sidewalk. I told the group yesterday, if I had a gun to my head as an architect and you only gave me one place in the life of your town, populate those sidewalks with these outdoor dining venues and colorful benches and you know, these colorful bikes and flowers and roll-up doors for restaurants. I mean, that just gives you a lot of great building projects as well as streetscape projects. Norfolk, Virginia, and I'll write this up in my report, they probably do the best example or best job at this vibrancy grant approach. So that's something to consider. The second issue that we observed and we talked about a little bit is you know, ordinances are tricky things, and it's particularly on a that are charged with writing these ordinances. It's a hard job. often happens, no matter where you are and when you write these, is there's almost always unintended consequences. So, and that's been the case here. There were some laws and ordinances written in the past that served a very, very good purpose, but they've had some unintended consequences. So the simple admonition I would have in this point is just simply go back and review them. There aren't any ordinances in place that are accidentally preventing you from achieving the downtown that you actually want. The only examples that kind of jumped out at me yesterday were, and by the way, you know this, Chayton told us that y'all are rewriting your sign ordinance as we speak, so I'm fire, but we all know that's not the right kind of signage. And so just write your ordinance and some design guidelines or standards to correct those things. But there's some inappropriate forms, and again, I'm not, especially this early in the process, advocating for form-based codes, even though I think. But you know, that sort of form is not appropriate sort of in the core downtown area. It should have looked more like the downtown core. I'm not going to argue with the use. I'm not picking on whoever approved that. I mean, that's water under the bridge. But you have a chance to correct that going forward. But this is certainly something that really needs to be addressed. And let me explain why. You know, storefront or first floor residential that in this case, and again, I hate to say this because I fear that you think I'm picking on you, and I promise I'm not. But the iron bars, you know, kind of reinforce that message. And so it's happened. It's all good. There's a lot of forgiveness and grace. But going forward, let's try to correct some of those minor adjustments in our ordinances to get the downtowns that we really prefer and enjoy. I can't wait to talk about this because we had a lot of buzz yesterday talking about your alleys and your art. I fell in love with your alleys just in a short amount of time, and it seems like it's low-hanging fruit that's just there for the taking. And I can tell you, I could be wrong, but college students in particular, they like those cool, edgy, funky. Almost sometimes the grittier, the better for these alleys. And so one of the key things that I want to introduce by way of, as you turn your attention to some of these alleys, as a result, I think that starts to cause us to think about these wonderful little moments in our downtown a great deal differently. Service alleys. Okay, they're more than that. They really create this wonderful opportunity. So by way, here's a couple of key criteria, and then I'm going to show some examples. First of all, make sure you just consider lighting. And I think everybody by now has seen an alley or a small street that's been covered with these sort of just a set of string lights can just change the whole ambiance of the place. Dirt cheap. I mean, you can literally go hang these up starting on Monday, but it makes a big difference. But don't limit yourself to just those kinds. You can introduce lanterns, globes. I think those are actually bottles. And then also you can do other physical things to sort of create an implied. This was in Granada, but I don't think our DOTs would probably allow that. But you could definitely put that over an alley. But again, any of these sort of gestures just create that sense of an implied ceiling because human beings enjoy a sense of enclosure. Lights and these kind of ceiling treatments do that.
And can you stop?
Of course, absolutely.
So the one with the umbrellas, it's kind of interesting. I think this is Wausau, Wisconsin.
Well, that or Portugal, but go ahead.
Well, Wausau, they're close, you know, Wausau, Wisconsin, Portugal. Wausau has a umbrella covered street right in their downtown. They've got a similar downtown square, and one of the nodes has this kind of umbrella ceiling on it. And they go through every season, and they change the umbrellas. And one of the interesting things is we were visiting with them last summer and refreshing the branding. And one of the things that they actually said was they wanted to integrate the umbrella imagery such a signature element of their community that they wanted to figure out a subtle way to bring that in. So we designed a nice little repeating pattern, like you were looking down at an umbrella.
Oh, that's cool.
So it wasn't, it wasn't this hokey umbrella clip art, but it was a way they could integrate that into their storytelling. So it's amazing how some of these design decisions in the physical place can truly turn into things that shape your overall identity.
Good, thanks. Good story, Ben. Don't forget about the ground plane. Now, I understand I love this city. You just bought your own asphalt production facility. That's amazing. So you may just want to choose to just, asphalt these or keep them concrete, but if you decide to do paper, in general, neutral and lighter tones are going to hold up longer than more pattern or design tones, just for the record. Then, of course, the walls themselves are these great opportunities. Of course, you can just let them be raw and gritty. You can cover them with art. You can do this idea from Holland, Michigan. If there's a narrow alley, you can see top of tables only take up about 18 to 24 inches. But these pops of color draw you in, or even a landscape, kind of a living wall. And then, of course, art. And you're welcome, Sarah. But just pepper these things with art, whether it's interactive art, functional art, just art for art's sake. Any of those things are just, they're fun gimmicks, but they just lure you through these alleys.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, how do you address the smell of dumpsters in alleys?
May I come back to that when
Yes,
I show you our
absolutely.
illustration from Gulfport?
Yeah, sure.
Remind me to talk about smell.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah, because the illustration he's gonna show is it's a community in Mississippi, and one of the restaurants that the alley served was a seafood restaurant. So you can imagine their garbage didn't smell good, so, you got Mississippi heat and seafood, and so that's definitely.
And I found a close runner-up. We have a butcher in Lake City, and raw meat, ooh, it reeks after a few days. So we'll come back to that. But I love the fact that let's still let these alleys do and be what alleys are and what they do. They definitely hide the utilities, the weather heads, the garbage cans. Just let them be what they are. But think about artistic treatments and things of that nature. It's up to you if you want to be this formal. But some alleys actually introduce sort of gateways to demarcate. To me, it's a matter of, if you only have one or two, then you may want to raise them to that sort of level. But if you're going to create this entire grid, then I probably wouldn't worry about it and let them just be what they're going to be. So here is Fishbone Alley. This is the example from Gulfport, Mississippi. I dare you to find an alley this ugly in downtown Kirksville, okay? The good news is, if we started with this, you're in great shape, okay? And the seafood restaurant, well, this is the barbecue restaurant here, and I think the seafood restaurant is at the other end. You can see, here's the grease trap right there. And what's worse is everything's sloped to the middle, and it just kind of pooled there. And so in our solution, we decided to take a very soft touch approach and not try to make this gritty alley become something. Now we did introduce, kind of the, what do you call this, the gateway, the arch. But past that, everything else is just kind of simple. Obviously, you can see the string lights, easy. These are nothing more than wood privacy fences. This, I think, was an air conditioner enclosure, if I remember. Yep, there it is right there. Further down, there is a walk-in cooler. We got hand painted. And you can see as well, these elements, just the little weather heads and electrical boxes, we just simply painted them. But you can see we introduced this continuous drain, and it has a, I don't know the technical word, but it's forced so that it's constantly introducing flow. If it collects, is going to be pushed so that it sits there. It's more, in other words, it's more than just gravity. It also has some kind of akin to a sump pump, but not exactly. And again, you can see this was just a bank of meters, and this local artist just turned it into a moment of whimsy. And I love this sort of brand icon on the very first leading edge of that. So the solution to the smell, of course, is we created either one or two shared grease traps. So instead of garbage cans themselves remain behind these, but I think they had to increase.
I almost think that they did like a slightly more advanced, garbage division system too, because I thought that there was something
It's like a
about.
compactor thing or something.
Yeah, there was something about, they put in a compactor at the other
Right.
side, but I know that the trash was circulating a lot quicker. And, so that you weren't getting that same kind of time period.
Yeah. The other end, there's
Did you
something.
know that you were gonna learn about, how long garbage stayed in the alley when you came to training tonight?
This is fresh off the press. I was in Fort Wayne, Indiana last week. I was just enamored by their arts presence in their alleys. One of the conversations we had yesterday afternoon, we have a presence of the arts, but we want to increase the presence. We've got couple of great universities, some of which have arts. How can we engage the students in those and create these? I was so impressed with Fort Wayne. So by way of orientation, each of these sides is going to have a vertical and then two horizontal. And this one over here, this shop right here, or that storefront, is their downtown. In your mind's eye, don't think visitor center in Kirksville. Think in terms of place where visitors to Kirksville would come and orient themselves. You can see right outside the door, they start to paint on the sidewalks, these little whimsical things, in this case. And somewhere right here, you can see it's a little faded. You'll show it better in this. That's called Art This Way. What they have done is they have used art in the alleys as a gimmick to lure you through. And so by way of example, you come this corner and you see the famous bluebirds. But once you're standing there looking at bluebirds, you look down here and halfway down the alley, there's something that peeks around the corner. And you go and you see it's kind of, at this point, fairly famous. It's called the Breathe mural. And when you turn down Breathe and you see something at the end of that alley, and what you see is this little guitar on the side of the building. And when you get down to that end of the building, you look across the street, and then the sidewalk, you see more indications of Art This Way, and now you see this brand new mural. And what you don't know is you're just kind of being led on this maze. And you haven't gone on the sidewalk or in the street yet. You're just going through their alleys. And so you come across then this Walt Whitman. And when you come around the corner of Walt Whitman, you see, I think that's a panda, it could be a dog, I'm not sure. And then you see, oh, well, that panda leads down another alley, and all of a sudden you got this hint of, what is that? You go down to the red light lanterns, and it's a pop-up park. This is a parking garage. These are rolling planters. These are nothing more than $99 wood picnic tables. But as a result, they've created a space, a place out of thin air in a leftover space between a parking garage and an alley, and some outdoor furnishing, a mural on the wall. Totally transformed the experience in downtown Fort Wayne. Art installations in their alleys. And the conversation we had yesterday afternoon was, the beautiful thing about this now is there are affordable ways to are hiring a professional mural. It's called lithographics. It's basically printing on aluminum foil that adheres to virtually any surface and it follows the contour. So in my mind, Sharon may already have some art that she wants to replicate. They want to donate a piece of, not the piece itself, but a reproduction of the piece. You blow it up to the size of a mural. You print it out in the lithograph. It's sort of instant murals for a fraction of the cost. I'm just guessing. I could be completely wrong. But if you start infusing your alleys with artwork by local artists, by local students, I guarantee you the students, when their parents come to visit, hey, come see my art downtown.
On the I said, I'm best. I'm all for it, but the amount of
probably needs to be an initiative of the Main Street program. I'll figure out the details and then invite them to participate. Again, only if you don't have enough kind of local artists to do it, but I think it would be a great partnership between the students and the university and the downtown.
Two Missouri communities that have memorandums of understanding with property owners, agreements, all those sorts of things. Chillicothe, they have 20-plus murals in their downtown. They have agreements with those property owners. They have all the paperwork, and then they maintain them. They have a maintenance program for those. And then Cuba, Missouri is the other one that are really known for theirs. We have some examples that we can help the Main Street program. If you guys want to be the administrators, how do we do this?
And honestly, this sounds kind of horrible, but I remember working in Paducah, Kentucky, and they had these series of murals all along the flood wall. And I was like, how much did each one of these panels cost? And they were, what, $1,000 a piece,
That's
you
about
know?
right.
And, you know, if you paint a $10,000 mural and people in the community hate it, that's one thing. If it's a $250 mural, it's a whole different thing. You know what I mean? Like, it allows a different relationship with the art, a different presence of the art in the community, and it removes some of the stumbling blocks that might have helped public art to truly be transformative for a community. So I love the material being able to tackle that.
How's that weather? The aluminum?
Oh, on a wall, it lasts as long as you want it to. You know, you've probably seen these. If you go to a major city, sidewalk, there's something, a decal down there promoting some activity. Walk on it, of course, it has a limited life, but up on the wall,
It can probably compete with paint. Yeah, I mean, it's
I would
pretty.
say, yeah, I
yeah.
agree. I don't want to put any individual spots. I'll ask the group who was here. Part-time pastor, okay. Well, let's talk about Lake City some more. Again, this is the town where I have the privilege of serving as their architect, and the presence of the arts there is profound. And so, don't limit yourself just to the alleys. Let it pour out into the public realm. This is using the same technology I just described. These are individual 5x5 panels reapplied onto the wall to create the entirety. Sarah, just for Sarah, you know, she's really enamored with these colorful pianos, and I will
I
vouch.
found a free one today, I'm just saying.
Telling you, that and hot tubs. Like, Kirksville can bring the public hot tub
Yeah.
to the market. It's not there yet. There's potential.
I sent Shane an email, I'm like, oh my God.
The beauty of them, and in Sarah's defense, they're very colorful, they're very eye-catching, and you get these amazing moments. Powerful. You know, it just draws a crowd. I have another photo of these old ladies, and they're just like, you can tell they're just reliving their glory days. And so that's a great thing. Again, just if you've got a blank spot, just do a temporary, art installation. These are propane tanks in our downtown of different color, just to introduce kind of whimsy. And this is a paint by number mural over here for a pass-through in between some buildings. Now, the big one, of course, is facades. Now, of course, here it's a little bit unique in the sense that y'all already have a big TIF project going on. So number one, I'm not trying to step on that architect's toes at all. I'm just going to offer a little bit of training about the general. So we're going to go back to design school for about 3 minutes. All right, here's minute number one. Here is a facade. And the nice thing about historic commercial facades is they almost all borrowed some of the exact same components. They were basically divided into the bottom, which is the storefront, and the top, which is the upper facade. And again, even there have some very common components that I've noted out here on the right. Here's the importance. The reason you have to get those things right and in alignment is called the street wall of buildings. And as long as you treat the storefront level and the upper facade correctly in terms of alignment of the then you get this really consistent feel regardless of the size, shape, materials, and style of the buildings. It's sort of those unifying horizontal bands that make it feel harmonious, even though there's a great deal of Right. One of the most important places in the life of the building, when I was in architectural school, I was taught the two most important places in the life of a building is where it meets the street. Where it meets the street is what we call the storefront. The easiest way to think about an appropriate storefront design is it needs to feel like a singular component that is inserted in the opening created by the building piers or pilasters in the storefront cornice, all right? Follow up number 2. I'm going to use this illustration to give you a super quick primer on historic storefront composition principles. How many people have played the children's game tic-tac-toe? So everything you need to know based on playing that game of the historic storefront. The historic storefront composition is in 3 rows and 3 columns. You have the display window, the typically but not always a recessed entry, and then the display window. There's your 3 columns. Rows are your bulkhead, the display window, and the transom. Get those 9 quadrants right, then all of a sudden the materials and some of the layouts, I'm not going to say they don't matter, but look at how harmonious all these are, and they're all different, but they all satisfy column 3-row configuration: display window, entry, bulkhead, display window, transom. You got it? I just went to architecture school. All right, so now we're going to play some fun. I'm just going to go through about 8 or 10 buildings that I've had the privilege of doing in the last 3 to 5 years, and just talk about some of those principles. Number 1, this is my ski lodge building. It's a joke. The ropes course, you can see it has this panel, the diagonal paneling, and then the awning is being held up by ropes tied to the top of the building. I know. And
It is literally called Lady, Kids too.
Yeah, it is.
That is like the worst name of a store I've ever seen in my
And they're
life.
selling ladies' fine dresses.
Right.
So here we go. I mean, this is a real simple one, but 9 times out of 10, there's good stuff underneath this. And by the way, Kirksville definitely took up the slipcover salesman when he came through town. Okay, you got a bunch of these, and so let's definitely remove them. And ideally, when you remove it, let's try to go back as far as you can to the historic substrate. I understand in some cases you can't. I'm going to venture. I'm going to go out on a limb that probably 95% or more of the buildings in downtown Kirksville were brick. Ideally, you need to be trying to get back to that brick, ideally unpainted, but sometimes painted for a variety of reasons. So real simple here, but just you can see how the awning fits within the frame. Here we go. We got the display window, recessed entry, display window, bulkhead, display window, transom. This is one of my favorite ones because I think a lot of people look at this and think there's no hope for this. But again, you can, if you look through the eyes of potential, look at the power of paint and awnings. Isn't that amazing? Just paint and awnings. And again, I'm not a big fan of painting brick, but when the brick looks this bad, it covers a lot of sin, okay? So there we go. This one, Ben and I worked collaboratively on this one. He introduced the branding. This was our creative economy take on a butcher. So we did a market analysis, and I'm sure they're going to encourage you all to do a market analysis in downtown Kirksville to find out what your retail are. When we did that for Lake City, one of the things that rose to the top was a butcher shop. Anecdotal input from the crowd was, we want a butcher shop, Literally was sitting around a table in the conference room and said, we asked, does anybody know a butcher? And somebody said, yeah, I know this guy named Dave. Somebody went out and paid David a visit and said, hey, if we would fix up a building and kind of give you an incentive, would you? So I was charged with meeting with David to come up with a design for his building. This is how. Can you give me your email address and I'll send it to you for review? So you didn't even have email. Okay. So this guy has opened up this butcher shop and he's just killing it. He's just killing it. He was creating ways to package meats and sandwiches for people. Doesn't look like much until you repaint it, regrade it, all of a sudden. Doesn't look like much, but with the right use and the right color scheme, you can really hot dog and ice cream stand. I promise you, one of these we've downtown, the students would come. Ashley, this is for you. The only thing I want to offer you is I understand you're doing this TIF, and fundamentally, it's kind of working like what we would call a facade master plan.
Right.
And Ben just encouraged me to mention to you that I've had a great deal of experience. All my war stories with you, the good, the best practices, the things to absolutely not to do, and I've got documents. I'll share.
And to say he has a great deal of experience, what he's not saying is he invented the facade map. Over a decade ago, South Carolina, the Department of Commerce decided that they wanted to, instead of giving these small 30,000 grants to all these communities, they decided to see if they could make actual impact on the economy. So they selected 3 communities and gave each one of them $900,000. And 3 of those communities, all 3 of them decided that they were going to explore the impact of investing in doing all these facades at once. So kind of the process of the facade master plan was born, and then it really was perfected in Gulfport, Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina, where they did 110 facades, all at the same time. So he's being humble. He knows this forward and back.
So in Gulfport, it was kind of an outlier because what funded this was FEMA's disaster recovery funds, which is, never have to use those. But you're right, we fixed over 100 facades. This is the original one. This was Union, South Carolina. We did about 80 with that 900,000. But I would actually want to feature this one because this is T90. They only had $200,000 and they fixed it. These are 3 actual before and afters. And the only point I want to make was because Keith was really encouraging us to not just show stuff. Let me say it before, and I'm being sincere when I say that the design is not all important, but it absolutely is important. About some of your buildings in your mind's eye. Think about the buildings that you. Tell me which one would promote investor confidence. Tell me which one kind of speaks to downtown is building momentum. Tell me which one speaks to. And that's the reason we invest in these facades. It's not because we just want to throw money at something. It is the only area in Kirksville that's different. That's why you absolutely have to care for those historic streetscapes. All right, pop quiz. What's wrong with this picture? I'll give you 2 hints.
Start naming.
So here's, all right, yeah. What's wrong with this picture? So here's the ski ramp. You go at the top and you come up. All right, just pertaining to streetscapes. Let's don't pick on the buildings. Just pertaining to streetscapes. I'll give you. What do you say? No plants? Who said that? No, that's very good. Yeah, as you can see here, Martians apparently landed and took away all of your greenery and trees, except for at the courthouse square. And oh man, I left out a before and after rendering that I really should have shown. I have a 2012, I'll show it tomorrow morning at the final presentation, 2012 to 2019, before and after the streetscape in Lake City. Buildings are different, but the biggest impact is the trees in the amazing the difference that trees and landscaping make in yes, I understand somebody has to maintain this, but I would hope that there's enough community pride that we want this as opposed to this, that we would be willing. You gotta paint this big vision, you gotta paint this picture of what it can be. I think your people would rally around it. If you can't saw cut it and embed it, I was in Louisville, Kentucky last week, and they just did it via planters. So in other words, you don't have to saw cut and plant, just bring planters out and now really do this easily.
Well, and we have examples, again.
Yep.
Of, I mean, Main Street communities, they're all doing it a little different, the maintenance piece of it. Whether it's adopt a garden,
Yep.
adopt a street, park and rec, Main Street managing it. I mean, there's all kinds of variations to make that happen.
Good point, Keith.
Yep.
And Keith showed you some of these images yesterday. Look at the power and the impact. These are 3 different corners in Liberty, Missouri.
Courthouse Square.
Yep. And again, you've got a mixture. Here you have actual planters, in other words, beds. Here you just have it all in planters. I do love the kind of this dual dance between. In the presence of the arts, you can't underestimate. I can put a half a dozen public art in a downtown.
And that's an award winner that was,
Oh, thank
Liberty
you.
won a Missouri Main Street Award for that.
And Chayton and I, we talked about crosswalks yesterday, again, due to your snow conditions, but you can definitely stamp your asphalt. And the color and the texture is so important. Again, I'm gonna do a rendering tomorrow for the final presentation of your downtown. Rolling over something that creates a sound. Seeing a pedestrian in a colored band just gives them more. My philosophy about downtowns, and I'll fight anybody who takes issue with me, downtowns, we allow cars to go through them. But right now, it almost feels like in a lot of our downtowns, they're for the car, and we allow people to walk through them, and it ought to be just. We need to treat these places like crosswalks in. And again, if you so choose, you can go the more artistic and creative. Last but not least, I only want to weigh in with a couple of thoughts, and Keith, feel free to weigh in about horticulture and things of that. We talked about trees kind of jokingly a while ago. I know that there's, by the way, this is not your square. This is from a project we did in Shelby. But I know there's a tree plan for the square itself, and I would just create a plan for the outer square, or say differently, the edges of your buildings that front. You'll indulge an opinion from South Carolina, I would strongly encourage. I think that alone would really start to make a big difference. Yes, Ashley. Will you be ripping up and?
Yeah, so that's all part of the plan.
And is it designed already? Or is it
One
conceptualized, maybe
is-
not?
Yeah, certainly conceptualized.
Gotcha,
One
gotcha.
is designed.
So here's a plug from your neighbor in Iowa. So when they were doing a streetscape project and they had their that way, in case you don't know, anybody wants to do upper floor housing or different separate. Not always, but most of the time sprinklers are required, and it can be very. Get to the base of the building, you probably cut their sprinkler. Probably, that's a really good incentive. That's probably. I would strongly encourage, just tap right up to the base, then it's up to them if they want to tap into it. But you got the sidewalks ripped up, you might as well do it.
It became a incentive for upper story housing. Hey, we've already done. Yeah, it was a game changer for second floor
Yeah,
housing.
that's neat.
Yeah.
So, and the reason for trees, and then I'll, if you want to say something. And you had to work really hard to find some shade. And so just, it's just far more issues than just comfort. I mean, they introduce fresh air. Value of a shade tree downtown cannot be underestimated. Anything you want to talk about?
No, and, you know, I don't know who's planning or who's gonna to do the work later on, but there are lots of different publications, and I can certainly help with what are applicable street trees. You know, of course, you wanna look at care and maintenance, and do they drop, you know, big ugly seeds or alley seeds, and, you know, all those sorts of things that are, then become nuisances. But, yeah, Bradford pears. Well, the great thing about ginkgos are great street trees, but there are male and females, and so you wanna make sure you get the right one, and, you know, how they do production these days, they can guarantee that you get the right type, and so, you know, but it's all those things that maybe there's not the knowledge, and you wanna make sure that. And as far as the courthouse goes, yes, they need to remove the ash trees, of course, but they've got some very mature trees there, so it's not gonna take away from the courthouse, and the trees they're introducing, decorative, shorter tree. So I think what it's gonna do is their tree plan is gonna keep the space open for programming, but they're gonna replace it with smaller ornamental trees that are gonna introduce some color also. The only comment I made yesterday looking at it too is I think some shrubbery in the corners with some green. All the trees there currently drop all their leaves in the winter, so, you know, all in all, I think it's gonna be a good thing. You already got your
Tomorrow.
piano.
Wait till tomorrow.
I'm going for two.
Where are you putting, where are you putting the piano?
She wants a live
roll
one.
around.
I don't know. I want a piano in front of a store that people can, Sherry wants it.
I was gonna say, there's,
I want
Believe you me, there's plenty of sidewalk space for it.
Yeah.
We could probably put a bike organ in.
Oh my goodness, Shelby, you just made my, like, year for that. I have wanted one for years. Because you know the Truman kids are gonna just stop and play. And there's so many musicians at Truman.
They, Friday. You should see my store on Friday.
Yeah, so I would love a piano somewhere downtown that could just sit.
We have some
All right.
store, like, let me wrap up, and we'll entertain some questions, but, yeah, the other good reason is just the arborist can give you not only species, but but you might as well start now.
Or today.
Yeah. Yeah. But don't underestimate the power, whoops, I went ahead of programming. You've got that green space, you know, if you have a jogging club, if you got a yoga club, if you got a quartet. Last but not least, and this is a good segue into Ben's section, and we'll close this presentation down. Is never underestimate the general public's inability to connect dots of your. You've got to lead them to where. You've got to tell them that these facades being fixed up are a part of your vision. And Ben probably will do some branding of that project. But every time a sidewalk is fixed up, planters go down, art is installed, trees or whatever, you know, make sure people understand that that's all a part of your long-term vision for downtown. So you get it builds their confidence. If you start doing that for the easier things, it builds their confidence for the more difficult. That's all I have to say. I hope that was helpful and informative. I'm going to stop this. Any comments or questions before we switch over to Ben's stuff?